Hi, my name is Gordy Hogue, and this is Community Connections. Each of us have stories that help us understand each other and help to bring our community closer together. I have been very fortunate to have met many interesting people. People who've had a positive, profound impact on our community and far beyond. People who've had incredible life experiences and fascinating stories. Community Connections is about these people and about their stories. I'm sure you'll enjoy meeting these amazing people as much as I have. Thank you. Please enjoy. Welcome to Community Connections. Today's guest is the consummate volunteer. He has volunteered and committed to be involved with our community and the improvement of our community. He's been on our school board. He's been a White Rock councillor. He's been mayor of White Rock. He's been the district director of Rotary International, to name but a few of his commitments to our community. Welcome, Hardy Staub. Welcome to Community Connections, Hardy.
Well, thank you very much, Gordon. And thank you very much for not only the introduction, almost if I wrote it myself, but I really appreciate you inviting me.
Well, I appreciate all you've done. And can you talk a little bit about how you arrived here in Canada and eventually to White Rock?
Well, the story of my life, right? There's a song that's called that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway, Gordy and everybody that's going to be listening to this, Hardy was born as Hartmut, but Hartmut turned into Hardy pretty good because pretty quickly, because Hartmut turned into Hartschmut and all kinds of names, and it became Hardy, and it stuck. Anyway, I was born in Berlin. It was on a Sunday, 1 o'clock in the morning, on March 2, 1941. And it was 1 o'clock in the morning. So yes, I was born in the night, but not last night. Right afterwards, the family moved to Austria, and we had to because my dad was an aeronautical engineer and a pilot in the German Air Force, which was the Luftwaffe. And he was stationed in Graz. He was more of a test pilot of any airplanes that sort of had a lot of things done to them, where they're in flight and came back and needed some fixing, and or new airplanes. And that's why the aeronautical engineer came into it. So that's what he flew. Anyway, we moved to Austria. I lived in a little village, really, and I was on a farm in Schladming. And Dad was stationed at Graz, the city of Graz, where the airfield was that he's working on. We stayed there until 1946, after the war, when we got Dad back, because about a year before he had been taken prisoner by the Brits. They treated him very nicely, let him go. And in 46, we came back to Berlin. And there had been a lot of land clearing during that time, between the time that we left and came back in. But the bad thing was really that aeronautical engineers or pilots were not exactly a good job to have in Germany right after the war, because you weren't allowed within 2 miles of an airplane. So anyway, and finding a job was pretty hard. Thankfully, I had an uncle who was actually the brother of my grandmother, who happened to be a director of one of the many theaters in Germany. And London has the West End, and New York has Broadway. Well, in Germany, in Berlin, we have the same thing, and it's called the Kurfürstendamm. That's the name of the street. And there were theaters. There's got to be about 20 theaters all along. It's a long road. And the film studios also. Anyway, he decided that there was a young boy that was sick and they needed somebody right away. So guess what? Right after having given my Christmas poem, I was on stage the next day and played, and I did pretty well. And through the years, I played in many places. I've been in every theater, played in operettas, things. In the end, I actually was in 1951. I played in a film. I showed you a picture last time. I'm not going to bother you with it this time, but I was sort of the Dennis of Menace of Germany on the screen. I had a slingshot and everything else, and got myself in a lot of trouble. Anyway, Dad, and then we sort of the acting actually supported the family in many ways because it was almost impossible to find a job. So Dad, in 1953, he was hoping to get in with Boeing when he figured if he couldn't get into US, but he could get into Canada. So he immigrated in 53 to find a job. And 6 months later, my mom, my sister Harold, and my brother Harold, and my sister Monica, we arrived 6 months later. We landed in Quebec City, took the train into Montreal, and voila, the family was back one again. And Dad at no time was he able to get back into aviation. However, he became the production manager, and I think he ended up in a vice president of a small firm. His claim to fame was, those big containers, the steel containers that they put on the ships and everything. Well, it was his firm, and he started them all. Uh-huh. So they became pretty big. Anyway, we stayed there, and where am I? Okay. My problem when I first came to Canada was in 54. I was in grade 7 in Germany, but they put me back to grade 5, mainly because I don't speak English. My German was pretty good, but and things. It took me almost 6 months and became fluent in English, except I had a big accent. There's a rumor going around that I still got some of the square. It still got an accent, but if I would have been a square head before, you notice it's been rounded off through the years a little bit. Okay, so we did that, and when I turned 16, my father, like a good German, said, "Well, my grandson, my son is, I don't know what he's going to turn into. He's got no discipline, and he's not no." Anyway, like a good German, he stuck me into the Canadian Army. They had a program at the time. It was under Prime Minister Laurier, where they had what they called a soldier apprentice training program. And what it was is you had to be 16 years old and had completed grade 8. And they would induct you into the regular army, except you went to Camp Borden and mine, and the signals went to Kingston's, depending. The only thing, because I wasn't a Canadian citizen at the time, I could go is to the Canadian Army Service Corps, which are the cooks, the drivers, the clerks, and later on the helicopter pilots, but transport was basically the job of the Service Corps. And I got stuck into it, and I still remember, this was in 1957 that I joined. And I still remember the first morning, arrived the evening before, and then next morning, and then 5 o'clock in the morning, there's a guy going around with a big cane and rapping at all the tables, getting us up. And I guess that was the alarm clock from that time on for the next 2 years. Anyway, we went, I did that. I graduated from that program in 1959. In 1959, after having the summer holiday, I was stationed into Camp Gagetown, which is in New Brunswick. And I was at headquarters, Quebec, headquarters of number 4 BCIG. It's an infantry brigade group. We had the red patches, so if something happened, that's where we're going to go. Anyway, a year later, I had been doing a lot of night school because I only had 2 years of high school from the Army. So I had been doing awful lot of studying and doing, how do you call it? Not online, but you sort of wrote the exams, you got the stuff, and that was before TV, really, in a way. And then a night school, of course. But I still needed grade 11. So in 1961, I asked the Army to give me a year's leave of absence. And they said, what for? And I said, well, I want to finish my matric. I want to graduate from high school. And they said, by all means. And the high school accepted me. And I went back to the high school of Montreal and did my grade 11 and wrote the matrics. And well, I was finished. The Army kept me in Montreal. I was at headquarters Quebec Command in the orderly room. And was my mate corporal. And as a matter of fact, the commanding officer happened to be the same commanding officer that I had when I was on his orderly room in Camp Gagetown, was Brigadier Danby. He called me in and says, son, we know that you've been going to university and everything else, and I'm offering you that we pay for your university and we'll make you an officer cadet. Well, you know, young people and things, yeah, I'd rather be an officer than an enlisted man. However, I said, well, let me think about it over the weekend. And he says, good choice. And I thought about it and I said, well, if I joined, my parents wanted me, I took 6 years of Latin, and, you know, my mom worked at university for a world famous doctor, Hans Selye, and did all his translation and everything else. And the whole family and him wanted me to go in medicine. Well, I was turning about 21, 22 now. And I said, okay, that's 7 years more. And I'll be a pretty old man by the time I get out of here. But I better get out of the Army because otherwise they'll tell me what to do the rest of my life. And I wasn't quite ready to do that. So I went and saw the Brigadier Danby, and I explained it to him. And he says, Hardy, I like your gumptions. You're right. You got to be able to make your choices, and you did, and I appreciate it. I was entitled to 1 month's leave, we call it rehab leave. He gave me 3 months. And off I went. And I put myself, I was running a country club, like a big swimming pool. It's summertime, right? In Montreal. I had 25 lifeguards, and I was the manager of them. And I got them, they were all ladies. Why were they all ladies? Well, I got to pick them. So we did pretty well. Those were the interviewing years. Anyway, I did that and went to Sir George Williams University, which is now La Cordier, and did 1 year there, but at night school. Because I had to put myself through. All this cost money, and my parents weren't able to do that. At the same time, I wanted to find out what I was going to do. It wasn't going to be medicine. So I studied journalism. I did that first at Sir George, and then I went to Carleton University in Ottawa for the 2nd year. I never did go all the way to the degree because I decided I'm not going to become a doctor. Journalism is something good. I think I had done some work for a local newspaper before, but anyway, I decided I wanted to become a pilot. And I started taking lessons, which took a lot of money. You know, today it's about to get a license and you go to the first commercial, it's about $130,000. Yeah. In my days, it was high, it was $10,000. And that was the same thing as it would be now. This is in the 60s. But I put myself through and I had quite a few jobs. For example, during the summer, I ran a country club. In the winter, I worked for People Credit Jewelers for Eaton's. I had a whole bunch of jobs because flying lessons are expensive in those days even, right? And I couldn't, my dad and my parents weren't able to pay for all that, the university. So I paid my way by having all kinds of odd jobs. One of the things was, although my acting days were gone because of the accent and the thing, but the country club, CFCF TV, had a youth program which every Saturday, and there was a boy and a girl that did it, and I was the third one because I ran the club, so I did get some TV time in there. But anyway, it paid. And finally, I did not. Now I I did not tell my parents of what I was doing. At Christmas time, I had my first license. It was a private pilot license. This was 1964, Christmas. And I said, they were sitting around the Christmas tree and everything else, and said, oh, by the way, Dad, I got this license over here. And he looked at it, and his eyes were from pop. Let me tell you, I became #1 son for good and ever, things like that. And we carried on. The school where I taught asked me, in fact, to become an instructor for them. I took flying pretty easy, and like a duck takes the water. That's what happened to me in flying. And I became a flying instructor and ended up being the chief flying instructor there. And one Christmas, would you believe, I was getting a total of $70 a month. That was a big salary at that time. And but it didn't take you very far. And but at Christmas time, the boss, the owner of the flying school from the Montreal Flying Club, he gave me a bonus check of $700.
Wow.
And I said, holy Methuselah. And I handed it right straight back to him. He says, what are you doing? And he says, well, you got a twin engine on there. I'm qualified to fly a single engine, and I need an instrument rating to fly when the weather is rotten out there. And I can't afford it, but this should help for it. Yeah, he says, it will. And I took the check back, and I got to use the airplane and got things going.
How did you get in? How did you get into flying with the national airlines from there?
Well, that's just coming in now. When I did my flight test for the instrument rating, was a Transport Canada instructor, Ministry of Transportation at that time. When I finished one, he sort of put his arm around me, and he had my application. Says, Hartmut Staub, right? I used the legal name. Yeah. He says, well, Hardy, what are you gonna do? And I said, what do you know me? He says, well, when you were running the country club, you taught my daughter how to swim.
Oh, connection. Yeah.
Anyway, I told him I'm 46 now, and I'm probably too old, but I would have loved to be an airline pilot. I probably missed that. He said, oh, yeah? He wrote a note, gave it to me, and says, go see the chief pilot, Captain Martineau at Quebec Air. And I went there, and I was hired by things. And I had very little time, but I worked like a son of a gun, and I came out the top of the course. There were a bunch of us, but I worked like I wanted this. Couldn't afford. This was my last chance. Anyway, from there, I flew at Quebec Air, and there were all the first officers, the co-pilots, and the first officers were all young bucks like me. And the airline at that time was doing some expanding, and they were looking for new flight attendants. So there was a whole bunch of flight attendants, new flight attendants come in. And us young guys, of course, stood by the door and shut them out because somebody had to do quality control and things. So we sat there, and I saw a young lady, a French-speaking lady, born in France, called Annie. And I said, needs further investigation here. And they were in school for a whole month. And I pulled a couple strings to find out which would be her first flight. And I made sure that I was the first officer on that flight. And on the day that it came, I showed up an hour early, got all the paperwork done. Captain came in and says, "Holy Matthews, I got nothing to do. It's all done." He says, "Well, I need some time off when mayors come in." And sure, this young lady came in, and she had to be the prettiest lady in the world. I have a picture downstairs. I should have brought it up here. But anyway, she walked in and introduced herself, and I had done all the paperwork. So I said to her, "Well, we got lots of time. Why don't we go for coffee?" She says, "Oh, okay," very shyly. And she and I started going for coffee. And we're followed by all the other young first officers that were in the same room and sat down. Anyway, we had coffee, and one of the first officers asked who she was flying with, and she pointed to somebody else. And I said, no, hang on, you're flying with me. And we went out to the airplane and was out on the tarmac, and I sort of said, "Well, this is your first flight. It's probably a long day, and we're going to overnight in the city of 7 Islands, Sept-Îles, which is in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, near Labrador and things, and next door to Newfoundland, that far into it." Anyway, she said, "No, we can't go out tonight. I was going to take her for dinner there." She says, "No." I said, "Why? What did I do?" She says, "My father told me not to trust any pilots." Holy Matthews. Anyway, we got in the airplane, and it was a F-27, a Fairchild Friendship. Takes 44 passengers, and you only needed one flight attendant. So anyway, we took off. Things, I made the announcement, "Bonjour, mesdames, messieurs, ici le commandant qui parle," and and things, and told them what we're doing, all in French. And when we landed, we did all the checks, shutdown checks, and I'm out of the cockpit. And the flight attendant had to clean the seats and get it ready for the next leg, right? And it was 8 legs that we had to do from there to Rivière-du-Loup, to Rimouski, Baie-Comeau, 7 Islands, up the Wabash into Labrador, and then, back and things. One of those milk runs deal. Anyway, I helped. She was cleaning up the seats, and she was new, and I helped cross the seat belts. And I did this all. I was brown nosing big time. Anyway, at the end of the day, when we finally landed in the 7 Islands, she came up to me and said, "Sir," and she called me lots of things, but I haven't heard of sir. And she used to later call me darling, sweetheart, and I haven't heard that lately, but anyway.
So I need to point out to people that now you and Annie have been married for how many years?
Well, 51 years now.
51 years now. That's a wonderful relationship.
Anyway, that just to finish the story, because it's, I took that night, we went out to dinner. We went out to dinner every night the next 2 weeks. And 2 weeks later, I took a flying in a small airplane. I rented an airplane from the school that I used to teach in. And we took off, and it was at night, full moon. Went over the city of St. John at 3,000 feet, and she started asking, "What's this instrument for? And what's that instrument?" The shy talk and thing. And I said, "That's enough." So I closed the throttle into idle, pulled up the airplane, and when it ran out, it started stuttering, and then started in the spin. And as the spin started, I popped the question, and it only took 1.5 turns, and she said yes. And then we landed.
What a great.
And then we got married about 3 months later.
That's a wonderful story. So we've got, I think when we submit this to the archives, they want about 35 or 40 minutes. So can you talk a little bit about how you and Annie came to White Rock, and about Natalie, and you got involved in the school board and the council?
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll cut out a little bit here, and we went to, after we got married, I was laid off at Quebec Air, and there was a talk about layoffs coming. And what I did is I took one of her passes, but what we call ID-90, only pay 10% of fares, and went on Air Canada, went from there to Ottawa, Toronto, Sault Ste. Marie, baby, and all the way up to Vancouver, but every stop. And I always got off the airplane and stayed there a day. And everybody that owned an airplane, I asked them for a job. And I got an interview with CP Air, and then I got an interview with Pacific Western Airlines. And then I went back home. And sure enough, a month later, I got laid off. It was in December. My layoff date was supposed to be December the 1st. And I had the layoff notice and I hadn't heard back. So I made a couple of phone calls. And I phoned Captain Franz Bergen, who was the director of flight ops at Pacific Western Airlines. He says, "Oh, Hartmut, I remember you. Can you fly a DC-4?" And I said, "Well, I just flew, which I did. I had checked out in the Super Constellation." And he said, "You're hired as of the 1st of December." Perfect. So Annie was a flight attendant. She quit. We got on the train, and we went all the way to Edmonton. And she had to quit her job, but she was hired almost automatically with Ward Air. We went out to the airport, saw Ward Air. Annie spoke French, English, and some Italian, and she was a beaut. And she was hired, and we flew. 6 months later, all of a sudden, we flew up the Mackenzie River near Norman Wells. That contract had finished, and so they laid us off. And here was again, I'm without a job. But I got home and talking about having a golden horseshoe, you know where. When I got home, there's a telegram from Quebec Air and recalling me back to Quebec Air. I had a lot of luck in my life. And anyway, we went back. Annie was transferred to Toronto, and she could commute through the airline to work, and that was it. Until 1973, when I came back to Edmonton, PWA called me back. I was laid off for 14 months from them, pardon me. And anyway, that's how I came to Edmonton. And a year later, I flew a Hercules. I got my first captaincy on a Hercules. But I also got a promotion to the 707. That was in Montreal. And so we went to Montreal, went to Vancouver. And when I arrived in Vancouver, where did we back? And I asked a couple of friends, and I was recommended to go to White Rock. So we went to White Rock, and we rented a house on Peel Street, Lee Street, pardon me, Lee Street, just below Maple. And we rented a house there. And I flew. Later, I got my captaincy there. And Annie told me one fine day that she's probably going to have to take a holiday because there was a baby coming. And that was how Natalie came into being. So anyway, she had a leave of absence from Ward Air and left. I worked there. I flew all over the world. I flew the Hercules, was my first captaincy, and I flew that into Bangladesh, flew for the UN for relief supplies, landed on roads on a Herc, wherever we had to do. Been in Angola when the Civil War was on. Basically, I saw some pretty sad things in the world, especially in Bangladesh. And I saw the Civil War happening in Angola. Anyway, my daughter turned 6. And it was time that, okay, we weren't talking German in the house because Annie couldn't speak German, but English, and Annie could speak French. So let's see if we get her into French immersion. And we showed up and at 8 o'clock in the morning, and just to find out that the classes were already full. I thought, it can't be. The doors didn't even open yet, and how come they can be full? But anyway, they were. So I talked to the principal, and asked him if I could rent a room and if he would give me the names of the families that couldn't get in. There were 35 of them. And he did, and I had a room. And I got them together. And anyway, convinced them that we should go and address the school board. And I did a whole bunch of research where the money was coming back and everything else. And I told them, please, let's not go in there and say, how dare you? Let's talk in there very nice and say, hey, this is the kid's last chance. And the school board, after the meeting, they were very polite, and I was the main speaker, of course. They knew who I was because I had given them my card, said Captain Hardy Staub. Oh, Captain Sir, and Captain Sir, and I, Jesus, remember me, where did this going? Anyway, they had respect, and they were going to let me know within a couple of days. I discovered later on that really the school board wanted to say, forget it, we can't do it. But we were too nice to them, okay? So they didn't quite want to do that. Anyway, I came back and they decided that they would open up another class, but it was at K. Kinwick up in Newton. And it was a school that had a lot of changes. In other words, it was nobody lived there very long permanently, if you know what I mean. And they need something cement. And I was with the chapter of what is it? Travels for French Immersion. There was a name for it. I forget what it was right now. Anyway, they had nothing going there either. They needed a stage. They didn't even have a stage, a little stage for the Christmas deal with cohesion. So I got those parents of the French Immersion involved to be with the community. And I collected some money from them. I've done that a few times, as you might recall. And I had hired a carpenter, and we built them a stage, one they could take apart and everything else. And anyway, it worked very well, and the school went great. Anyway, it turned out that we had a school trustee at that time who says he was at one time a principal, but quite frankly, he wasn't a very good representative for the school board. His name was Clarence White, and he's no longer with us, unfortunately. But anyway, I ran and I won, and I was on school board. Now, how do I get from there to the city? There was labor problems at that time. Earl Marriott needed a major renovation, and it had to go out to contract. And the unions were telling us you had to be a union contract. But the winning bid was not a union contract. And it was held up for about almost 4 months. Finally, I lost my cool and I announced through an in-camera meeting that there was one trustee whose husband was very much involved with the union movement. And they were holding it up. And I said, this contract is going to be given to the lowest bidder within the next week. Otherwise, I'm going to the paper and tell them what the holdup is around here. And guess what? We had gave out the contract and I was in. But
So
then
we've got about another 10 minutes and they'll be cut off. I want to move
okay. Okay.
Council and Roadway
Okay.
contribution.
Okay, it became Roadway. That's one of the things that joined the community club. Became president and then later on the district governor. And I had 50 clubs and we worked very hard. As a matter of fact, you remember Symphony of Sand?
Sure do, yeah.
And things. And that's where you and everybody said to the kid, we'll never get it. I'm older than you are. And they called me the kid. But anyway, with the help of Darrell Taylor and the Rotarians, we raised the 50 grand and we had it done and did that. We did a lot of things, cleared up the policing. We had a Marine Drive. We had a lot of problems there. You made me the counselor, or I was a counselor then,
Yeah.
for community policing. And I rode along with the policemen men quite often, quite regularly. And I told them, I'm not the check pilot here. I'm not here to check on you guys, but I want to hear ideas. And I came with a rather long report to city council. And the city council gave me an attaboy for it. It was quite deep. And I had checked it out with the commanding officer of the detachment, and we said, and I had the support of this. Anyway, we did, and that's how we cleaned up Marine Drive. We held a public hearing, and we had a bylaw. Vin Coyne was the one that said at that meeting, he says, we need to get the voice done. And if you can hear me, if I can hear them, it's too loud. And it was a $2,000 fine, and we put it up. That's got me in there. And then I told you, you and I went to a meeting in Halifax, Canadian Federation of Things. And we celebrated that quite well. And the next day we went to St. Andrews by the Sea by car.
Yeah.
And neither one was feeling very well because we celebrated pretty well. But you had started a competition about getting young kids doing sports, right?
Yeah.
And anyway, they won because they just canceled the school and went out. But the deal was that you had to clean the cannon. And so while we got into St. Andrews, I ended up cleaning the cannon while you went and blanched it with everybody else. But anyway, we did kinds of things. I did the Symphony in the Sand with the help of a lot of people. Nothing was me. When I say these things, I didn't get to where I'm going by myself. It was the community and friends and cooperation, and above all, listen to people. And that's how we got it done. We got Symphony of Sand. One day, the then-time mayor, who'd been there for 20 years, told me one day that he was going to run for parliament, and if I would be so good to raise some money for him. And I said to him, well, if you're running for parliament, who the hell is going to become mayor? And you pointed at me and said, you are. Anyway, I did raise money, and you were didn't have any money on Friday, and on Monday we had paid all the bills, and they said, well, Hardy raised $16,000 over the weekend. Held one hell of a golf tournament. Anyway, that was this, we got it done. Well, what I do was, since then as mayor, I did a lot of things. Number one, that we had, what made me mayor was not only Symphony of Sand, but the sidewalk restaurants, things what I had done for the policing, things like that. I was known within the community as getting the job done and finding.
I think one of the things that you always did so well was you were always out, you always were out listening to people as well. So when you talked about riding with the police, and so many politicians, I don't think do that. They don't look at the policies and who they're going to impact, and you've been so good about that.
Well, you got to reach deep within the community. That's basically what you have to do if you're working for the community. Anyway, I did this for, I did a lot of things. I mean, won a whole bunch of awards, as you did too. I became the vice chair of the Greater Vancouver Regional District, and they sent me off to Dubai, where the United Nations had a meeting to give, and part of that meeting, that is Vancouver Regional District, which is now Metro Vancouver, was getting a big prize. So I went and gave the speech, and I was, anyway, came back and well, did a lot of things. I mean, brought the bus service. I remember the day when I saw a lady on the street and she looked distraught, and what happened is her husband just passed away. And that is bad enough. And then I discovered, she's, how am I going to get to the store and everything else? I can't drive and everything else. I said, we'll fix that in a hurry. So remember Mayor Traveler?
Traveler, yes.
Yeah, he became a mentor of mine too. And I went to, he was ahead that time of transit. And we got the committee together and I said, I need some help. I need the small buses in here, and got them there. Yeah. They supported me. And I remember going back to the lady and I says, come with me. And I went to her house. We went to the bus stop, took the bus, took it to the shopping center and back, and she was happy. And she followed her. She's been gone many, many years now. But, you know, I was sort of a buddy in lots of ways. I did things like that most of the time. What else can I say? I mean, you know, my history, I had 17 years total, including school board. I was an alderman, and then the NDP decided that Mr. Newman would become Mr. New Person. We have to change the name because it had the word men in it, and we became councillors. I wish you'd stayed to the old one. It was a title and things. It meant something. Anyway, then I ran 3 terms. Altogether, it was 17 years. But I was 9 of those were as mayor and taking over from you. And then when I retired from the airline in 2001 after flying, well, I retired after flying big 747 all over the world. But I was senior enough that I could say I'm flying from Friday on, or Thursday night on, until Sunday night. And I have to be back for council meeting because the rest of the time I'm in City Hall. I used to come into City Hall Monday morning and bring roses from Thailand for the ladies in the office with me because I was up there. And then until Thursday noon, I would have my uniform hanging in the office. I'd go in the washroom, change, get my suitcase and say bye-bye, get out of the airport, and I flew to Rome for some pasta or to London for some beer or go to China or wherever I was going. But it was always back late Sunday night, and Monday morning I was back in the office. Basically, I did that until I was retired. Basically, I think I can't add anymore. I could tell you all the wonderful things that we in the community have done during that time. But, you know, that's enough of me.
No, you've obviously had a very profound and positive impact on our community. So as you look forward and the changes that are happening now and looking into the future, for somebody who might be watching this 25 years from now, what things could you tell them about what the future of our community is and how you think it's going to be developing, and what are the most important things facing it today?
Well, pardon me.
Your cup says motor oil on it. What is that?
That was when from Doc Hudson Motor Oil was a cup that I bought at Disneyland when we took the grandkids to Disneyland about 3 years ago, I guess. And I love this cup, so that's my favorite cup. But anyway, back to what you'd say. I think Ben Coyne said it pretty well. Our community used to be closely knit community. But as we grew, and of course, people pass on, we get new people in town. Some of them feel all of a sudden, but I say it this way. Anybody in elected office in the last 20 years, the quality has gone down. People, you wouldn't hire, a lot of them that were elected now, whether in council or even in higher office. If I was in business, you wouldn't hire them. You know, they're there for the wrong reasons. They say, oh, I'm there. They don't know, they haven't been in the community, they don't know the community. All they were doing is being able to make sounds. You should do this and write this, and why are you doing it? Damn the mayor there and everything. That's what happened to Wayne Baldwin. And it happened during my time, during the last term too. And you also know that once you're on council as mayor, it doesn't take too long because the councillors, they would like the job themselves. And you had it happening to you. That person tried it on me, and I pulled a fast one. I just said I had enough and let them duke it out. And then, of course, he was fired in court. But anyway, so that's the first thing. What we need to do is actually, it's very important that people like you, myself, and people that we know in the community, that know the community, reach out to community and find people that really care for the city and have the intelligence and the conviction to get out there and work and get to know the community and do something. And that hasn't been happening. I know when I retired, I had a hard time finding out who would run in my stead, because I had two people running. They were going to run against me. And I said, let them duke it out. Because if I would have run, we could just storm the ward, and then one of them, who should never be mayor, would not make it. And I did the right thing because he didn't make mayor. But we have to.
So your message, the message is that it's important that people understand the community, that they be engaged in commitment and caring for the community. And out of those values come the position that they should look for prior to running for office.
And we should make sure that people that they run are gentle, respectful, and care for the city. And instead of themselves, that's the most important thing. You have done that. I like to think I have done. Wayne has done that. We've got some work to do.
Well, thank you for that message, for that reflection of the values and how important it is that people listen. And certainly you epitomize the people who are out there and listening and caring and conveying that. So on behalf of Community Connections on our community, thank you so much for being a guest, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you so much, Hardy Staub. Thank you for joining us today on Community Connections. Please tune in to our next show as more amazing people share their wonderful stories. If you haven't already, please click on the red subscribe button below, right down there, and view our updates. Feel free to leave any thoughts or comments that you may have. We're always trying to do a better job of connecting this wonderful community. Thanks again for joining, and until next time, keep connecting. Thank you.